How's my property transferred at death? Well, it depends. Depends on whether or not you have a will, and it depends on what kind of property it is. And it also depends on how it's owned. For instance, if you have a valid will, then you've designated how you want your property to be distributed when you've passed, and you've also decided who the person is, your executor, who is going to see that estate through its final distribution. But there are other assets that don't go through the will. Those assets have beneficiary designations. So think of retirement plans like 401ks and IRAs. Think of passbook or savings accounts, checking accounts, things like that. Those usually have beneficiary designations. And if the beneficiary designation is current and correct, then that asset will pass to your beneficiary without going through probate and without going through the will. The third way is through operation of law. So think of this one as if you owned a piece of property, real property, and you owned it with someone else, either as joint tenants with right of survivorship, or you owned it by tenants by the entirety. The difference between those two is subtle, but let me just say that tenants by the entirety is something that married couples here in Virginia are able to take advantage of, whereas joint tenancy with rights of survivorship is either married couples or it could be any two or more people who own it. Though what happens in a case like that, the operation of law says that each tenant, each owner owns that property, and as the co-tenants or the co-owners pass away, then it automatically passes to the surviving members. So that's your operation of law. The final one is state law. This comes into play if there is no will. And when there's no will, I tell folks, you're not bringing your own playbook into the probate process. So what ends up happening is that you have to use the Code of Virginia. And at that point, if you're using the Code of Virginia, it's written generically and it's written for the 8.5 million people who live here, and it may not apply to your situation specifically. So those are the four ways that property is transferred at death, either through a valid will, through a beneficiary designation, through operation of law, and through state law.